So welcome, and today I've got someone fabulous as our first guest on the new series of podcast interviews that we're doing. Ambassador for Arts and Culture, founder of Felt Now, podcaster, and just genuinely hilarious and funny comedian Simon Beckwith. So thank you for joining us this morning, Simon.
Formal in the meeting.
I know. So I try and be proper about it sometimes, but sorry, So we're here. You're here to talk today to us about your new show that's coming to the Stand Newcastle. But I always like to find out kind of where it all started. So roll back the years. So comedy for yourself. Where did it all start as a youngster, I guess?
Well, I wasn't that young, so I was 27 when I first did stand-up. So I'd always written. I was in a series of dead-end sort of call centre jobs that I absolutely hated. And I knew I wanted to write and be creative. And then I started watching a bit more stand-up. I'd always watched stand-up for years. Went to an open mic night. And after watching a very mixed bag of acts, so some good, some very, very bad. It's sort of the bad ones that make you go, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So after watching an open mic night, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. And then booked myself in like a couple of weeks later. Did my first ever gig. And then it's just been sort of 10 years on now that I've been doing it.
And did you have any kind of growing up, any kind of comedic influences that kind of dictated your style or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, I watched a lot of stand-up, so there was always stuff made me. So I used to watch a lot of like the American sort of mixed bill stand-up shows. So Comedy Central at the Comedy Store was the British one, the Montreal Just for Laughs ones for the sort of Canadian festival comedy, and then there was loads of American stand-ups that I used to watch. So I used to love Bill Hicks. I used to watch Doug Stanhope and Josie Long, who are both sort of two ends of the spectrum, but both of them I'd went to see live before I ever did stand-up. And I watched a lot growing up, but I just try to absorb as much as I can with anything like that anyway. So there's no particular influence, but I did watch a lot of stand-up.
Okay. And you mentioned there that you wrote a lot before actually kind of doing it live. So how do you find the difference between the creative process of writing versus that of actually kind of getting up and performing and, in front of the crowd?
The process behind it's still similar. So whether you're writing like short stories, reviews, articles, bits like that, it's still similar that you've got to put, I like structure, I like putting the work in, I like the prep. So all of it, the actual process behind it, that gives you the freedom to be creative on stage is quite similar. So I think there's a lot of similarities in the work that you put in. It's just that on one of them, you're getting up and performing it in front of a bunch of people, which then is a different skill in itself.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of from when you first started, have you found your styles changed at all? Or do you think it's remained quite similar in terms of kind of deliverance and such?
Oh, it's definitely changed. Like, I'm much better now. I'm nowhere near as crap as I was when I first started. So I think you get better. Confidence is a huge thing for a stand-up. The more confident and comfortable you look on stage. So I think the huge thing that comes is when you start to really enjoy being up there and when you just want that time to last forever and it feels like this amazing thing that you want to just keep going. You feel more confident, more comfortable. Because ultimately the best comics are the ones who just take who they are and turn the volume up to 11. So like the more comfortable that you can feel up there, the more that you yourself, the more honest and open you are. I think that's definitely helped. Like I'm definitely more of an honest, open actor than I thought I would be. And I've gone down more of a sort of, particularly doing shows like narrative, storytelling's really interesting. But ultimately, like, you just need to be funny. It just needs to be joke. And you get better at writing better jokes the more that you do it.
Okay. And do you have any like memorable performances or anything from the years that you've been doing it that stand out?
You tend to remember the bad ones, Aaron. That's the thing. It's like they're the ones that stand out. I could tell you loads of good stories about room above pub gigs where I've performed to 2 people and a dog. Like I've got loads of them stories. But the good ones, like there's loads of just nice gigs. Like the nice gigs tend to be the common thing. It tends to be the things that happen most. So I could tell you loads of nice stories. Like stand weekends are always nice. So you've got the Stand Newcastle, Glasgow, Edinburgh, great clubs. Stuff like doing the Fringe was really good. Me solo shows, so doing a solo show at the Stand previously, doing a solo show at Alpha Betty. Those are the ones that you remember. But the good gigs tend to thankfully be in the main. Like I had a lot of good gigs towards the back end of last year where just there was a run of them where every single gig was like, oh well, it's just amazing and memorable and everything feels just nice. Like ultimately, like comedy audiences, I think particularly coming out of the pandemic, were just desperate to go to stuff again. So there's been quite a nice vibe in most rooms for comedy lately.
And you must still get the odd heckler at gigs and things like that. So how do you deal with that when you do get them?
You don't get it anywhere near as much as people think it happens. I think it's more common now because of white powder being more prevalent on people's nights out. And generally, I think because people crowd work more and see a lot of crowd work clips online, they think they're helping or they think they're part of it. They're absolutely not. Just pack it in. But I think because I do a lot of comparing, I do a lot of crowd work, like ultimately, like if you just sort of deal with it. I think audiences are always on your side. So as long as you say something back, generally audiences have paid money to watch you or watch other comedians, not to watch them. So putting down a heckler or dealing with a heckler isn't really that hard because ultimately they're not helping, they're not adding to the show. They're just being a bit of a bell and audiences don't like that.
You touched on like crowd work there, and I suppose if you watch TikTok or Facebook nowadays, you see a lot of comedians put out kind of a lot of clips about like crowd work and such like that. And then I've seen comments, I went to the gig and it's nothing like, or I say nothing like is what I saw online. Because crowd work's only, like you say, a small element kind of a gig and such like that. Do you think it's, not misrepresenting, but do you think it is the crowd work? It's good to interact, and I guess with everyone kind of on stage and such like that. But do you think it gives a false impression in terms of kind of being known for that solely, as
Oh,
opposed
can do, yeah. You've got to just write jokes, do jokes, comedy's jokes. You will never think of something on the spot that is anywhere near as funny as something you've honed and crafted on stages over years. Just write jokes, do jokes. So I think the big misconception is that there's a lot of crowd work clips going out online.
Yeah.
And they're great, but often they come from compares. Compares jobs, it is, and I do this a lot, to warm up a crowd. So interacting with people, warming them up. What you're trying to do is set the room up ready for stand-up comedy, because stand-up comedy for me is the best art form in the world. Watching someone do a proper set or a show or something that they've honed is the best. Crowd work's good, but it's just like, it's a trick. It's like a performance trick, and I think the curtain's been sort of pulled back on that a bit now, because there's a lot of crowd work out there. So ultimately, I think for audiences, it's people who've never gone to a weekend club or gone to their local comedy club, or every town's got a room above a pub gig. And if anyone's never went to one, all I can ever do is just go. Watch what it's like watching a mixed bill show with 3 comics and a compare on. Because what you get is a compare, the best compliment you'll get is someone going, you should do that. Like, you should get up and do stand-up, because they just assume you're part of the room or part of the venue and just introducing the act. So crowd work's great and it's fun and it's great for pulling clips out because you're not burning material that you want to do all the time. But ultimately, it's nowhere near as good as proper crafted jokes. Like, that's what stand-up is. It's those jokes and those interesting ways that you structure those jokes together. There's nothing ever going to be as good as that.
Right. Do you have a personal joke, not from your own repertoire, but that you've heard that, you know, is a favourite of yours, or one that you kind of repeat to friends?
I don't reckon, because of my favourite jokes, because I was talking about this the other day, I don't think there's anything suitable for this interview that I can repeat to Aaron. Like, my favourite jokes are like horrendous, and there was one the other day. But like, jokes don't, like, I do love the crafting of jokes, and what I'll find is, like, with you, what's great is your mates write jokes that you really, really love, and you quote those back, or you'll be in a car going to like a gig in like Horsforth or something, and you spend that entire car journey having a chat about, oh, I remember when such and such said this, or I like this joke. So deconstructing jokes is really fun. But what happens doing comedy is you just enjoy comedy less for a bit, because you deconstruct everything and you try to look at the mechanics behind it. So there's loads of jokes I love. I kind of think of any that are clean enough or suitable to repeat now.
So, never know who will get to watch this. So keep it clean this early in the morning. So you mentioned earlier as well about being able to perform at places like the Alphabetti and the Stand Newcastle, and you said earlier as well that especially coming out of COVID, people want to get out and see. How important do you think these kind of venues are in Newcastle, and just similar venues around the northeast, just in general?
Our cultural scene's massively made up by, like, the venues are critical, and because you'll always get, again, like, people creating pop-up stuff, so a music scene will always be driven often by like room above pub gigs through to your bigger tour venues. And then the same with comedy, you've got like a regular comedy club here, which we're very lucky to have somewhere like the Stand. But then again, you've got the odd little room above pub gig and things on the outskirts. But it's theatres that then allow like shows to thrive. And I mean, we came runners up in a commission to write for theatre. So theatres and the support and level that we've got for that's really, really exciting. But ultimately, like, the more venues you have, the more people you have creating work, which means the more of a cultural scene you've got. The key to those venues is stopping people having to move away. If you've got a strong theatrical cultural scene in the Northeast, it means people aren't having to move to London for work or move to Manchester for work. Ultimately, that's what the Northeast always struggle with, is creating regular work. So the more good venues that we have, the more work that's in this city, the less we have to move away for work.
No, and through your own kind of day to day, you play quite a big part, I guess, in terms of like cultural, kind of influencing or just pushing culture within the Northeast. So I know previously you've been at Newcastle Castle, you've been at Alphabet Theatre, you've been a board member at the Exchange Theatre and Queen's Hall Arts in Hexham. So what's it like for those kind of roles to kind of partake in what they're doing as well?
It's great for me, I think, because I grew up very working class, very poor. Like, I didn't feel welcome in the arts till I was like in my 20s. If I didn't do stand up, I wouldn't work around arts and culture because I wouldn't have known it was for me. I didn't feel like it was for me until stand up got me into theatres and got me into other rooms. So, like, growing up working class, growing up in a town like Hebburn, it's really important to me that access to the arts is there. So even just the term the arts, I know, is a barrier and off-putting to some people. So for me, it's key that where I can, I try and work in. So again, being a trustee of a charity like the Queen's Hall is great because I get to be a part of the decision-making process for a massive venue that opens up doors for people to go and see the art. And it's always been really important to me to have people get access to the art. And I'd always worked as a freelancer around art. I mean, now I'm solely, as of this month, like solely reliant on comedy and writing as the income, because I'd always just had that safety net, if you like, of doing other little bits and bobs of freelance work. So whether that was like working with art companies or marketing shows or working around content and branding and stuff like that, that there was a bit of extra money coming in to top up when I was chasing up invoices for comedy or whatever. But now, so it's stepping back from some stuff, but then aiming bigger. So rather than working with a theatre show around the marketing, I'm working on my own theatre shows and writing. So it's a big step, but exciting. But I'll still obviously being trustee of board theatre in general and things like that. I still want to be involved as much as I can and to give as much back as I can for a general art form that's gave as much to me.
No, it's great that you're giving back and trying to push that access to kind of people, anyone that's looking to get into it across the board. And you're also a co-founder. You run regular podcasts previously on like maths and such like that, so that must be kind of fun, entertaining things to do on the side as well previously. And they gained quite kind of a following. I think maths in general has a kind of following as one of them, but taking the different topics that you have done podcasts on, how have you found doing those?
Always good. I think what you do with a podcast is you try and find a niche of something you want to talk about. So, I mean, me and my mate Kelly did 17 episodes about the film Grease 2. No one else is ever going to make that podcast, and I'm glad that we did. And I think that in itself can be a real art form and something that's really accessible, really easy to make. It's really hard to make good, and I think that's always been the key for me, is to make quality content, like make stuff that's high-end produced. And it's something where definitely, if you listen to the first podcast I made, I'm mortified by how they sound compared to the later ones. But you get better as you go, and I think if you can find your niche and things you want to talk about, there's an audience out there. It's something like 95% of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. It's something stupid like that, because most people will do a few and then get bored or realise it's a lot of work and a lot of admin. So I'm always pleased that everyone I've started, I've finished. It's either been like a limited run of something or it's planned out and still ongoing. So I think podcasts are a great way of getting an audience for something that's a bit different to stand up.
That's it. And now you're coming, obviously, back to Newcastle, but you're coming back with a new show. So your last one was Get Lush, maybe your first solo show, which again had huge, great reviews and such like that. So now you're coming back with a new one called Bricks. This one's quite personal to you. So firstly, I guess we'll ask kind of, how did you come up with the title Bricks, and what is the show that you're bringing out about?
So the show's about me relationship with my stepdaughter, which is a very positive relationship. So I love being a stepdad. Like, I'm a dad, like, ultimately, like, I'm a dad, she's me babe, but we are a step family. And it doesn't get represented in media a lot. And I just said some throwaway jokes on stage once about being a step parent. Someone come up and talked to us after because they had a step family, and they were like, it never gets talked about. And it just sort of like lit a fire and set something in my head that was like, all right, that's interesting. And ultimately, I called it bricks because me and Erin bonded over playing Lego. So just it was that simple, really. That was something that we, when we first started hanging out, just played Lego together. I think that's why for ages she just didn't fully get that I was an adult. She just thought I was another babe to hang out and play Lego with because of how we are. So that's the show in a nutshell, really. It's just about being a step parent and what our relationship is, but it touches on a lot of other topics, but that's the core of that story.
Okay. And how did your partner and stepdaughter feel when you said, "Oh, I'm going to do a show about this"? It's, like you said, it's hugely personal. So, well, I don't know if there's anything that obviously relates to certain things within it, but did they find that a positive step as well?
Oh, definitely. Like, Erin's got a poster of it on her wall, so like she's absolutely chuffed because she's got a little Lego version of her on the poster. So she was delighted. So I think if you're going to talk about other people, all I think you can ever do is really talk about from your perspective anyway. So I think you're not telling. And there's a line I say in the show about, like, there's a bit where I touch on something to do with her, and I'm like, that's her story to tell. I think you keep to what your story is, and it's fine. But if you feel like anything's personal, I'd always just ask anyway.
And you said it's kind of underrepresented in the media. Is there any particular reason why you think that is, or is it just a subject that's not covered in general?
Just don't think it's covered. I just don't think. I think because it's not the main sort of family format, and it, like you spent, I mean, throughout the 80s and 90s, particularly in sitcoms, like it was a very nuclear family driven version of what a family is. So it's not something that gets represented loads, and if it did, it's like the evil Disney ones. So like there's loads of evil Disney step parents, but it's hard, I guess, to represent every family type, but ultimately it's just not come up loads. It's starting to change. You do see more of them, but it's nowhere near as represented as what the percentage of the population that experience it is.
And I know the show's already had kind of a couple of outings previously. Has it developed or changed in any way that people who may have already seen it come to the show and then go, oh, a bit different, or is it?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I think I always evolve everything you do, so it's much, much better than even like last time I did it. I was really, really happy with it, but there's a lot of changes gone in. There's a lot of work, and there's a lot of tweaking the bits that I like that I've made better, and the narrative of it's updated. So I've tried to make sure the story I'm telling is the story up to today, not the story to the last time I did it.
Okay, and I've read on some of your promotion for it. Obviously, it's a show for everyone, but you are particularly encouraged for people like yourself, step parents, step kids, and that to attend. Is there anything in particular you want them to come out of the show afterwards feeling, or kind of is it relating to, or is it just a general feel good show?
Just want them to laugh. Ultimately, it's comedy. Like, yeah, there's a narrative and there's a story behind it, but ultimately, I just want them to come out, but I laugh loads then. That's what the goal of any stand-up show for me should be, is just to make someone laugh relentlessly for an hour. Like, that's all. Like, there's a story there, and it's nice that I get to tell my story, but ultimately what I want is for people to come in and just have a really good night, just watching a good hour of comedy.
And the show's this week?
Sunday the 18th, yeah, so not far away.
And that's happening at the Stand Newcastle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tickets are still available. So if you fancy a night out, evening out, and good laughs, then Si is your man. And yeah, grab your tickets online. The link will be down below. But yeah, let's thanks Si for his time today. And yeah, we'll be there at the show. So we'll be looking forward to seeing what it's all about ourselves.
Cheers, Aaron.
Thank you.